Undoubtedly, the amount of disinformation in the current media landscape, especially on social media, is extraordinary. The onslaught is so fierce and ongoing that the general public can no longer distinguish between fake news and authentic information. This is why we decided to start the series Our Journey, Their Story, in which we will share the stories of people and organizations unfairly targeted and framed by mainstream media. This series aims to be your guide through media misinformation. We will uncover hidden truths behind the headlines. The topic is so complex that we will discuss it over time and break into digestible pieces. We will also call on experts in the field to help us make sense of the disinformation and use specific case studies to demonstrate the red flags of disinformation. Our first podcast focuses on why knowing about unethical journalism is essential and what the red flags are. Someone once told me, you should never let the truth stand in the way of a good story. I was totally taken back about this, but I never in my wildest dreams could thought that, this will actually happen in real life. But wait. Want to stop a cult? Then don't buy a bottle of Aqualay bottled water, was one of the blaring headlines released by News24 on the 19th of September 2020. It was part of an ongoing and extensive media campaign against the mission, which included a public call for a boycott. Can you imagine? Other sensationalized headlines includes Mission of Fear, I Escaped from the Mission of Hell, and countless others. These headlines caught the attention of the seasoned communicator Gerda Potgieter. She needed a case study for a book about the lack of ethics in news reports, so she started researching the News24 KwaSizabantu coverage and found a case study of note. You have no idea. Gerda recently published a book titled A Journey to the Truth, the Case of KwaSizabantu Mission. In it, she explored whether the headlines and media onslaught against the mission were justified or unethical. She focused on the News24 coverage of the case and studied the Exodus, Uncovering a Cult in KwaZulu-Natal, campaign for over 3 years. Gerda quoted the following extract from the media cartel and its disregard for public good in the beginning of her book. This sets the scene for our first discussion in the series, Our Journey, Their Story. The media is now big business itself and only getting bigger with the rise of huge media conglomerates. When it comes down to it, the media is relatively incapable of serving the public good. Gerda, welcome. It's such an honor to talk to you. But before we get into the detail, please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, thank you, Janet, for the wonderful introduction. I cannot really add anything positive, more positive to that. It's just excellent. Thank you for that. Yes, as you said, I'm a seasoned communicator. I've got more than 40 years experience in the communication field. Before the book, I actually did research in 2020. I retired after a 30-year career working with media, knowing exactly what they're doing and what they're not doing and what they're supposed to do, etc., etc. So I started to research fake news. You'll remember it was pandemic and fake news suddenly, took over the internet. Yes, our lives as well. That's true. So I started to do research for the purpose to do a doctorate. But while I was working on it, I just, realized that the book will be the better first step going forward. So, yes, I've got various degrees. I've got lots of experience in the media field, in the communication field. I worked a lot with the media. So, yeah, I could bring the expertise and the experience of over 40 years to the book to help the public to see the red flags of fake news.
Yeah, on the positive side, I also notice, and I know, and I'm a very proud brand ambassador of your magazine, Devoted.
Yes. You know what? Over the years, while working with mayoral projects, etc., I realized the media, they like sensationalized stories. But if there's a good story, a good thing, you struggle to get them there. But if somebody does the wrong thing, then, you know, you and I have a history of over 30 years together. We did so many pageants and projects and stuff together. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
You ask them to come and give some positive coverage. You don't get them there.
No show.
If somebody makes a mistake, the next morning, 30, 40, 50 phone calls. But over time, the public also, the audiences, they also became more negative. So I don't know which one was first, the egg or the chicken or what the case might be. But I started with Devoted. It's a free magazine online, www.devotedmag.co.za. And that was basically, I don't sell it, it's for free for everybody, to counteract the negative news in the mainstream media and to give people more positive news. I believe we need more positive news and less sensation.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Coming back to why we're here today, why did you decide to write the book?
Well, while I was doing my research in 2020, after I retired on fake news, independent journalist called me and she said, she knew that I was looking for a solid case study to demonstrate the unethical red flags of journalism. So she called me, she said, you must read what's going on in the media about the KwaSizabantu Mission. Now, I didn't know anything about the KwaSizabantu Mission back then, but I started to do the research. And a week later, she called me again and she said, Gerda, you must especially read the News 24 stories. I have investigated it over a month, 2 months. I can't remember exactly how long. And there's, I tell you, all of those stories is lies. It's enough material for you to do your doctorate on. So I started to zoom into the KwaSizabantu case specifically, and then when I started to read through the headlines of News 24 and, you know, the public boycott, I thought to myself, you know what, there's something wrong here. And I smelt a rat. So I then my first, I started to do my own research about KwaSizabantu. It was only negative news. So I saw on the website that they are open to the public. You can just call them, make an appointment and go see them. Oh. Now, that is not how a cult operates. A cult wants you out of there. So I went to KwaSizabantu in November 2020. And within a week, I realized that I had my case study. And I asked them, by the way, I'm not a spokesperson for KwaSizabantu. I want to make that very clear. I'm not a spokesperson for them. I approached them. I asked them, please, I need a case study for envisaged doctorate. May I please use this because I think we're onto something, and they gracefully agreed. Okay. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's actually quite a ride, hey? But we will get into that. You mentioned a few unethical journalistic tactics that attracted your attention. What caught my attention was the call for a public boycott of the mission's water. I mean, that seems extraordinary and could border on hate speech, I think.
Absolutely. That in itself is unethical. I mean, if you know what KwaSizabantu is all about, in the first place, it's next year they will celebrate 55 years of the mission itself. But the founder, Reverend Ernest Stegen, he sadly passed away last year. When he started his ministry, it was his God calling to go out in the Zulu community to spread the gospel and to uplift the communities. Now, you remember that was in apartheid years. So you can imagine the challenges and whatever. So if you go through the history, what they're doing, there are thousands and thousands of community members dependent on the mission because they have the bottled water Aquele, as you know. Yeah. They have export quality avocados and a wide range of diverse agricultural projects that they sell to support the ministry work. And media, news reports should always be to the benefit of the public, not to their detriment. It cannot be, like in this case, to the benefit of a small group of people. I call them conspirators in the book. A small group of people with media contacts who started the smear campaign because they wanted to take over. Remember, Reverend Stephen became very ill at that stage. So the issue of a new head for the mission was on the table, and they targeted a specific person at the mission. They wanted to get rid of her, so they started the smear campaign, and they had contacts with the media, and it ended up on the desk of News 24 editor-in-chief, who saw during that they needed subscriptions, of course. The whole media thing changed during 2020. Remember, we stopped, even I had to stop with Devoted and to distribute that because of COVID, etc., etc. So everybody went online. The public was in their homes. They couldn't go out. They couldn't buy magazines, couldn't buy. Everybody went online. So they needed a scoop to advance the newspaper, I think. And it was just such a sensationalized story for them to ignore, willingly or unwillingly. The public must decide. After they've read through the book, we don't want to give away the whole pot. They
Yes,
have to decide. There's a specific, on the front cover, I see so, and was it an expose, as they claim, or was it sensationalism? You decide, because a good news reporter give the facts. You give the context. You make sure that your informants are credible. Those are all important ethical principles that you and I will discuss more fully in future. You have to make sure of all those things. And just give the story to your news consumer, and they have to decide who's wrong and who's right, not decide for them. That's a difference between a journalist who writes a book or whatever and a news reporter. News report is so much, news reports are different. You have to be ethical.
Was News 24 the only mainstream media outlet that reported negatively about KwaZizabantu?
No, definitely not. What happened in December 2019, Rapport started with the negative news, and Marula Media. I also explained that in the book. And it was based on a social media Facebook posting of one of our very popular private investigators. So he posted, he was paid to come with evidence about the money laundering challenges, allegations and other stuff that was in the media. And, he was not even at KwaZizabantu. He sent somebody else to do the research on his behalf. They couldn't find the money laundering money that they talked about, but they said to Noseweek, Noseweek is an investigative magazine. When Noseweek investigated them, they said to them, you know what, we couldn't find anything, but we are sure the money is somewhere on an island. Okay, so that's what they told Noseweek. So Noseweek was the only newspaper, it's actually a magazine. Noseweek was the only magazine that had an alternative story about KwaZizabantu. All the other media just repeated what either Adrian Basson said, because remember, he drove this whole campaign, the editor-in-chief. He was the one that called out for the public, not me, he, not nobody else. He, in his personal, said, me, Adrian Basson, the editor-in-chief of News 24, next time before you buy a bottle of water, read our stories first. So that, as we said before, in itself is unethical. But yes, Noseweek. So to get back to the book, what I did was to zoom into the News 24 report, which, by the way, was more than 171. I forgot to file this stuff. This in itself shows you there's something fishy going. Why report so continuously about one single organization during COVID, during Russian war, during all these other pala issues, government stories, electricity problems? Why focus so much on one single institution? That in itself shows you there's something wrong. But Noseweek exposed that they did the research far longer than News 24. They went in far more deeper into the stories behind the stories. They discredited the informants. They said that it's a smear campaign driven by disgruntled former workers and embittered family members that wanted to take over the mission. So that was my cue. Firstly, to find out, is that true what Noseweek said? And then, is it true what News 24 said? So I give both
benefit of the doubt.
scenarios in the book.
So what was your finding about the two narratives? Was it who was right and who was wrong?
Well, I will go with Noseweek because I did research for 3 years. I will definitely go. Noseweek is a reputable. Some people say, because they come now up with all sorts of nonsense. Some people will say Noseweek is not this and Noseweek is not that. I tell you, it's a reputable magazine, and I found they did thorough research. But apart from that, the CRL Rights Commission also investigated the News 24 allegations. Because the conspirators, as I call them, they filed complaints all over the place. And when they couldn't get what they wanted from those organizations, they went to the media. So the CRL Commission said KwaSizabantu is not a cult, and the media abused the word cult. So that's one thing. Then there was also an independent panel of law experts who investigated the mission, and they spoke to so many people. They had more affidavits. News 24 said they relied on 6 affidavits, which I explain also in the book why they are not valid for very obvious reasons. And we're going to explore those also in following discussions. But Noseweek, to answer you in a short sentence, was spot on with their claim that the editor of News 24 at a mission, they call it, was the editor-in-chief on a mission with a mission. Very nice. And I think it was one of the best headlines that I saw through the whole process. And then also to expose how unfair the mainstream media was, because most of the others just went on the bandwagon. They didn't do their own research. We call it the right to reply. We will talk about that later. Nowhere could I find KwaSizabantu's side of the story. Only News 24 side of the story, which was repeated and repeated and repeated on so many social media platforms. It sounded like a lot of atrocities, but it was the same stories that was told over and over again, with different versions, by the way. We will talk about that also later.
I can understand now more and more why your book is about unethical journalism. And I'm quite sure you can explain why this topic is so important for us.
Absolutely. Remember, we're going into a national voting thing. What do you call it?
Election.
Election, that's the word, sorry. It's not easy to be 70 years old.
Yeah, and both of us are actually Afrikaans, and then sometimes my English just...
I think in Afrikaans as well, and speaking English, yeah.
Sometimes
but anyways,
your English just dries up, but that's fine.
So since COVID, the fake news that the news consumer are bombarded with, as you said in the beginning, people can no longer distinguish between fake news and the truth. And that's what you and I are now going to do, is to explain to them when a news report is fake and what they have to look for. With this coming elections, if you go on social media, whatever, the lies that we are being told. I mean, if I can just mention one thing, can you remember in February, our dear president said electricity problems are sorted out. There will no longer be electricity problems. The next day, the Minister of Electricity dumped us into a phase 7, I think, if I remember correctly, phase 6 or 7.
Yes.
Really? So it's important for the news consumer to look out for unethical, for fake news, let's call it what it is, for fake news, and to empower themselves by knowing what to look out for. And that's what you and I are going to do.
Gerda, thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. Next time, we will briefly discuss what ethical journalism in essence entails. I am, as you know, an ambassador for the Online Devoted magazine. So if you want to read authentic and well-researched news and just plain good stories, hey, because we need that, I think, more often in our lives, visit the website www.devotedmag.co.za and you can download the magazine totally for free. Until next time.